Hi everyone, I just wanted to see whether you've marked your grammar work, and I wanted to go over a few points with you that I think are important. So we've got these typical errors that you need to avoid, and they're errors that we see that come up very regularly. So let's have a look at the beginning. We've got the first mistakes that come up frequently on page 78. The infinitive proposition. Now have a look on the screen there. Can you see there are two examples of the infinitive proposition here. Now you answered the questions on page 78. Now remember, so we've got the basic rule here in French. We've got sujet, premier verbe, COD, to deuxième verbe. So you have to remember that rule, and then look at these two examples here. Simple examples, okay, but that often cause problems, and we've talked about this before this year, and I think we've got to talk about it again because you're making too many mistakes on this one. So let's have two examples. I want you to help me, and the second one we're making it a little bit more complex, just changing the tense. I wanted you to help me. Can you see how flexible this is? All you have to do is change the tense, but the structure of the sentence remains the same. Other examples you can think of here using the infinitive proposition: I ask you to do something, I expect you to do something. These are examples we've seen this year in class, so you've got to look at those again, alright? So try and remember that rule, okay? On that same page we've got agreements. Can you see? Problème d'accord here we've got on page 78. These examples may seem simple to you, but they are problems as well for you. So we've got, look, number one, this cookie singular, these cookies plural. So this changes to these, and then because you're adding the S, not only do you write it, you pronounce it. Cookies, z. Right, conjugation here, we've got people were, plural, whereas everybody knows, look at this example here, everybody knows is third person singular, and because you're writing that S, you have to pronounce it as well, so everybody knows. And these conjugation mistakes really are important, because when I hear someone who can't conjugate properly, it's hard for me to understand. Alright, so you have to help me here. Let's look at page 79. We're looking at different forms of the verb. So we have one example here of the passive voice. The story was written. Our auxiliary verb is be, conjugated in the preterite. Singular, it was, and the word that follows that is the past participle. Now we've studied this year. It's not that difficult really, okay? The story was written. Plural version, stories were written. We're looking at the past perfect. We had he had lived. Do you remember he had lived? We're using the auxiliary verb, which is have. Here it's conjugated in the preterite, and we're just adding the past participle afterwards. Alright, he had lived. Nice example afterwards on page 79. He believed he would be able to, or he'd be able to. So you choose whether you want to use he would or he'd be able to. That doesn't matter. Just remember, and this is perhaps something you need to write down in your books, is that you put the verbal base after. So, for example, he believed he would be able to help, for example. Okay, remember that verbal base. This is something you need to write down in your books, I would imagine. The gerund, page 80, afterwards. Have a look. Now, as a linguist, personally, I would write these formula down. In the book, I think there are about 5 or 6 examples I've written to here. Look at these two examples here. They left without plus verb plus ing. For example, they left without saying goodbye. Okay, and you have to write these down in your book and memorize them and use them again. They left without. And also, I think it's important to compare that structure in English with the French structure. So obviously in French you would be using they left without, you would be using the infinitive in French, whereas we're not using the infinitive in English, we're using verb plus ing. These structures, you have to write them down. Second example in the book, I am fed up with, or I am sick of, or I have had enough of plus verb plus ing. Okay, for example, I'm fed up with working. I am fed up with studying, for example. You know, these are examples you could use. So write these two sentences in your book with plus verb plus ing afterwards. Another common mistake that we find, and I've mentioned this to you a number of times this year, how do you translate pour, afin de, you know? And so we've got two examples here. We've got to, we've got in order to. So you choose which one you want to use, but don't forget to put the verbal base afterwards. To go, in order to go, for example. A couple of confusions on page 80. You can see I've got two examples here. It reminds me of something, or I remember, and I think you're confusing them because they're similar in French. Can you remember? So let's have a look. For example, the text reminds me of an experience I had a couple of years ago. Whereas I remember an event in the text. So these verbs are different. So don't mix them up, all right? And don't forget to conjugate as well. It reminds. You write the S in the third person singular and you pronounce the S as well. And finally, prepositions. We saw some in these activities on prepositions. You have to memorize these prepositions that go with verbs. So a common one that you forget to add is listen to. You know, I listen to music. You know, it seems very simple, but you often make this mistake. Don't forget to. Go to. I go to school. So the preposition for goes with the verb wait. I wait for you. A film by. Interested in. So think to yourself, what would that be in French? Interested in. What preposition would you use in French? Try and compare how English works with how French works, you know? Do that regularly. Be curious. And the last one is our last preposition, married to. I am married to, you know, for example. Okay, so have another look at those examples there. And when you come across something that's new, write it down and be curious. Okay? Right, I'll see you later.